Hello, and welcome back to the Candlelit Journal. If you're new here, let me tell you where we're going tonight. Somewhere quiet, somewhere warm. An old inn sits at a crossroads where two ancient roads meet, and an innkeeper tends the fire, welcomes travelers, and writes down their stories in a leather-bound journal. Tonight, we join him during the Harvest Festival, that golden pause between the work of gathering and the long sleep of winter. The roads are busy with travelers heading to nearby villages, with merchants bringing their last wares before the cold, with families reuniting and old friends meeting once more beneath autumn skies. So settle in. Let the fire warm you. Let the innkeeper's voice carry you somewhere gentle, somewhere safe. This is the Candlelit Journal.
The 16th day of the harvest moon. The festival begins tomorrow. I write these words by the light of the white candle, though the hour is not yet late. Outside my window, the sunset paints the western sky in shades of amber and rose, and the ancient oak at the crossroads stands silhouetted against that fading light like a sentinel watching over the land. Its leaves have turned to burnished copper and deep gold, and when the wind stirs through its branches, they fall in slow spirals to carpet the ground below. All day I have been preparing. This morning I rose before dawn, when the sky was still the color of bruised plums, and the air held that particular crispness that tells autumn has truly arrived. The grass beneath my boots was silver with frost, the first real frost of the season, and my breath came in small clouds as I crossed the yard to the woodshed. I have been stacking firewood for weeks now, knowing that the festival would bring more travelers than usual, knowing that the hearth would need to burn bright and long through the coming nights. The woodshed is full to bursting, oak and ash and apple wood, each with its own character, its own voice when it burns. The oak burns slow and steady, patient as the tree itself. The ash catches quick and bright, eager to give its warmth. And the apple wood, the apple wood fills the common room with a sweetness that makes travelers close their eyes and remember orchards they knew in childhood, fruit picked warm from the branch, cider pressed in old wooden barrels. I carried armload after armload into the inn, stacking the logs beside the great stone fireplace until the pile reached nearly to my waist. More than enough for 3 days of celebration. Then came the food. The root cellar is a cool, dark place beneath the kitchen floor, accessible through a heavy wooden door that takes both hands to lift. Down there, in the earth-scented darkness, I have stored the harvest of my small kitchen garden and the provisions I have purchased from passing merchants throughout the season. Turnips and carrots and parsnips, their skins still dusty with soil. Onions braided into long ropes that hang from the ceiling beams, garlic, pungent and papery. Potatoes in burlap sacks, cabbages wrapped in cloth, barrels of salted pork and smoked ham, wheels of hard cheese sealed in wax, dried apples and pears, their sweetness concentrated by time. I spent the morning carrying these treasures up into the kitchen, planning the meals I would prepare. For the festival, I will make my father's recipe for harvest stew, a thick, hearty thing, rich with root vegetables and chunks of pork, flavored with thyme and rosemary from the bundles that hang above the hearth. I will bake round loaves of bread, their crusts golden and crackling, their centers soft and warm. I will set out crocks of butter and pots of honey, bowls of pickled vegetables and platters of cheese. The travelers who come will not go hungry. This I promise. By midday, the kitchen was fragrant, with the smell of bread rising and onions softening in the great iron pot. I stepped outside to rest my back and found that the world had transformed while I worked. The morning frost had melted and the autumn sun, still warm, though it reads lower in the sky now, had coaxed the colors of the land into something almost unbearably beautiful. The fields to the south, where the lowland farmers grow their grain, have all been harvested now. The stubble stints in pale gold rose, and here and there I could see the dark shapes of crows picking through what remains. Beyond the fields, the forest has become a tapestry of color. Red maples bright as embers, golden birches trembling in the breeze, dark pines standing like sentinels among the riot of autumn hues. And the sky was that deep, endless blue that only comes in autumn when the summer haze has burned away and the air is clear as water. A few clouds drifted high and slow, their edges touched with gold by the slanting light. I stood there for a long moment simply breathing. Harvest is more than the gathering of crops. It is a pause, a breath, a moment of recognition. We have worked, we have grown, we have tended what was planted, and now we gather the fruits of that labor. Tomorrow the village will celebrate with music and dancing, with food and drink, with the ancient rituals that have marked this season since before anyone can remember. But today, in this quiet moment, I celebrate in my own way by standing in the autumn sun and feeling grateful for another year, another harvest, another season of travelers welcomed and stories heard. The afternoon brought the first of the festival travelers. They came from the south road, a family in a creaking wagon pulled by two patient oxen. The father walked beside the beasts, guiding them with a gentle hand and a soft voice. The mother sat on the wagon's bench, a sleeping child in her lap, and another child beside her, a girl of perhaps 7 or 8 who stared at everything with wide, wondering eyes. In the back of the wagon, amid bundles and baskets, sat an old woman wrapped in a patchwork quilt, her white hair escaping from beneath a wool cap, her weathered face turned toward the sun. I walked out to meet them as they approached the crossroads. The father's name was Willem, and he had the look of a man who works the land, broad shoulders, calloused hands, a face weathered by sun and wind. He told me they had come from a farm 3 days south, where they grew barley and raised pigs. The harvest had been good this year, better than the last 2, and they had decided to make the journey to the village festival to sell their surplus grain and buy supplies for the winter. But that was not the only reason they had come. The old woman in the wagon was Willem's mother. Her name was Hannah, and she had grown up in the village near the inn, had lived there until she married and moved here south with her husband more than 50 years ago. She had not been back since. But this year, she had asked her son to bring her one more time, she said. She wanted to see the old oak tree again. She wanted to walk the streets of her childhood, She wanted to attend the harvest festival, as she had done when she was young, before life carried her away to other places, other duties, other loves. Willem helped his mother down from the wagon, and I watched her stand at the crossroads, looking up at the ancient oak with an expression I have seen before. That particular blend of joy and sorrow that comes when we return to a place that has stayed the same while we have changed beyond recognition. She reached out and touched the bark of the tree, her thin fingers tracing the deep grooves. "It's smaller than I remember," she said, and then she laughed, a soft, wondering sound. "Or perhaps I have simply grown." I showed them to their rooms, helped Willem stable the oxen, brought warm cider and braised brood for the children. The little girl, her name was Marta, followed me around the common room as I worked, asking questions about everything she saw. Why did the herbs hang above the fireplace? What was in the big iron pot? Why did the candle on the mantel burn so bright? I answered as best I could, though some questions have no easy answers. As evening fell, more travelers arrived, a merchant from the eastern coast, bringing bolts of dyed wool and bundles of dried fish. A young couple walking hand in hand, their packs light, their faces flushed with the happiness of new love. A stonemason traveling north to find work in the mountain quarries, his tools wrapped in oiled cloth to protect them from the autumn rains. The common room filled with warmth and conversation. I served bowls of soup and loaves of bread, poured mugs of ale and cups of spiced cider. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the great stone chimney. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, and the harvest moon rose over the eastern mountains, round and golden as a wheel of cheese. Old Hannah sat near the fire, the patchwork quilt still wrapped around her shoulders, and she told stories to anyone who would listen. Stories of the village as it was 50 years ago, when the old mill still stood by the river and the blacksmith's forge rang with the sound of hammer on anvil from dawn to dusk. Stories of harvest festivals past, when the whole village would gather at the crossroads to make offerings to the old gods and dance until the moon set. Stories of a young woman who fell in love with a farmer's son and followed him south, never knowing she would spend the rest of her life longing for the place she had left behind. The children gathered at her feet, listening with rapt attention. Even the adults fell silent, drawn in by the rhythm of her voice, the weight of her memories. I listened too, as I wiped tables and swept the floor and tended the fire. I have learned that the old carry stories worth holding, and Hannah's stories were rich with the texture of a life fully lived. When at last the travelers retired to their rooms, I climbed the narrow staircase to my own chamber beneath the eaves. The harvest moon poured through my small window, silver and gold, bright enough to read by. I lit the white candle anyway. It has become a ritual now, a way of marking the transition from the day's work to the night's reflection. Tomorrow, the festival begins. The village will be crowded with visitors from all directions, farmers and merchants, craftsmen and performers, families reuniting and strangers meeting for the first time. The inn will be busy busier than it has been in months, and I will have little time for writing. But tonight, in this quiet moment, I am grateful for the harvest that fills my cellar, for the travelers who fill my common room, for the old woman who touched the oak tree and remembered her childhood, for the little girl who asked about the candle, for another year, another season, another chance to welcome those who pass through. The 17th day of the harvest moon. I am writing these words in stolen moments, between serving meals and welcoming guests, and stepping out to watch the festivities. The Harvest Festival has begun, and the world outside my door has transformed into something magical. I woke before dawn, as I always do, but this morning the darkness was already alive with sound. From the village a quarter-mile to the south, I could hear the distant thump of drums and the bright notes of a flute. People were already gathering, already celebrating, unable to wait for the sun to rise. I built up the fire in the great stone fireplace and set water to boil for tea. By the time the first light touched the eastern mountains, the common room was warm and fragrant with the smell of porridge and honey, and my guests were stirring in their rooms above. Willem's family was the first to come down the stairs. Old Hannah moved slowly, leaning on her son's arm, but her eyes were bright with anticipation. She had dressed in her finest clothes, a deep blue dress that must have been carefully preserved for decades, a white lace collar yellowed with age, a silver brooch shaped like a spray of wheat pinned at her throat. She looked for a moment like the young woman she must once have been, and I felt a strange ache in my chest at the thought of all the years that had passed since she last wore those clothes. The children ate quickly, too excited to sit still, and soon the whole family set off toward the village. I watched them all from the doorway of the inn, the wagon creaking along the road, the children running ahead, old Hannah sitting straight and proud on the bench, her white hair bright in the morning sun. Then I returned to my work, for the festival brings no rest for innkeepers. Throughout the morning, travelers came and went in a steady stream. Some stopped only for a cup of cider or a quick meal before continuing on to the village. Others arrived from distant places, weary from days of travel, and took rooms for the night. I lost count of how many hands I shook, how many names I heard, how many stories began to unfold before me. There was a ribbon merchant named Tobias, whose horse was growing too old for long journeys. He told me this might be his last festival circuit, that soon he would have to find a place to settle and open a shop instead of traveling from village to village as he had done for 30 years. His wagon was a wonder of color. Ribbons of every hue hung from the sides and fluttered in the breeze, red and blue and green and gold, plain and patterned, narrow and wide. He let the village children choose one ribbon each free of charge and watched them run off with their prizes streaming behind them like bright tails. There was a baker's widow from a coastal town to the east, a woman named Ingrid, with flour still dusting her sleeves, and a sadness in her eyes that she tried to hide with busy hands. She had come to the festival because her husband had always loved it, had always insisted they make the journey each year, and she could not bear to break the tradition. even though he was gone now, taken by a fever the previous winter. She sat by the fire and did not speak much, but when I brought her a bowl of stew, she looked up at me with such gratitude that I had to turn away to hide the emotion on my face. There was a puppeteer with a cart full of carved wooden figures, each one wrapped in cloth like a sleeping child. His name was Oren, and he had the quick, clever hands of his craft and eyes that seemed to see everything, to miss nothing. He performed for the children in the village square, bringing his puppets to life with such skill that even the adults stopped to watch, enchanted by the little dramas that played out on his small wooden stage. And there was a minstrel, a young woman named Clara, whose instrument, a traveling harp with a chipped frame and strings that had been replaced so many times the sound was a patchwork of different tones, had seen better days but still sang sweetly in her hands. She played in the common room that evening, songs I had never heard before and songs I remembered from my childhood, and her voice wove through the music like a silver thread, bright and clear and achingly beautiful. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell the day in order as it unfolded. By mid-morning, I could no longer resist the pull of the festival. I left the inn in the care of the moment, the fire banked, the pot simmering, the door unlocked for any traveler who might arrive, and walked the short distance to the village. What I found there was a world transformed. The village square, usually a quiet space where farmers sell their produce and neighbors exchange gossip, had become a riot of color and scent and motion. Booths and stalls lined every edge, selling everything from fresh-baked pastries to hand-forged tools to bolts of bright cloth. Banners hung between the buildings, red and gold and orange, snapping in the autumn breeze. Children ran everywhere, faces sticky with honey, hands clutching toys and treasures. Musicians played on every corner, fiddlers and drummers, pipers and singers, and the music wove together into a joyful cacophony that seemed to fill the very air with celebration. At the center of the square stood the harvest pole, a tall wooden pillar decorated with sheaves of wheat and garlands of autumn leaves, ribbons streaming from its top in every color of the rainbow. Around it, dancers moved in an ancient pattern, their feet following steps that had been passed down through generations, their voices rising in songs that were old when the first stones of the village were laid. I watched for a long moment, letting the joy of it wash over me. The harvest pole has stood in that same spot for as long as the village has existed, or so the elders claim. Each year it is decorated anew, the old sheaves and garlands removed and fresh ones tied in their place, the ribbons replaced with bright new colors that will fade through the seasons until the next festival comes. There is something comforting in this repetition, this annual renewal, the knowledge that our ancestors performed these same rituals, danced these same dances, sang these same songs, and that our children and their children will do the same long after we are gone. I made my way through the crowd slowly, stopping often to greet people I knew. There was the miller's wife, selling small sacks of the finest flour for festival baking. There was the cobbler, demonstrating his craft to a circle of fascinated children, his hands quick and sure as he stitched a leather sole. There was the elderly woman who tends the village's herb garden, her stall fragrant with bundles of dried lavender and rosemary and thyme. At one corner, a cheesemaker had set up a tasting table, offering samples of his aged wheels to anyone who passed. The cheese was sharp and crumbly, with a tang that spoke of cool caves and careful aging, and I accepted a slice gratefully. At another stall, a weaver displayed her work. Blankets and scarves in patterns I'd never seen before. The wool dyed in shades of deep blue and rich gold that she told me came from plants she gathered in the hills to the north. A cheerful farmer with a red face and a booming laugh pressed a cup of honey wine into my hands and insisted I try his family's recipe. It was sweet and potent, with a warmth that spread through my chest and made the already bright colors of the festival seem even more vivid. I thanked him and moved on, careful not to accept any more. An innkeeper cannot afford to be anything less than clear-headed. Near the edge of the square, where the crowd thinned and the noise of celebration faded somewhat, I found old Hannah standing before a cottage. Her hand was pressed against the weathered wood of wood. The door, her eyes distant with memory, her whole posture one of profound stillness amid the bustle around her. "This was my home," she said when she saw me approach. "I was born in this house. I learned to walk in that garden." She pointed to a small plot of vegetables beside the cottage, overgrown now with autumn weeds. "My mother grew roses there by the fence. Red roses, bright as blood. I can still smell them sometimes when the wind is right." The cottage was occupied by strangers now, a young family who had moved to the village just 2 years ago, according to the neighbors. They had welcomed Hannah warmly, invited her inside to see the room she had known as a child, and she had declined. "Some memories," she told me, "are better left untouched." The home she remembered no longer existed except in her heart, and she preferred to keep it there, preserved and perfect, rather than see how time had changed it. We walked together through the village, she leaning on my arm now as she had leaned on her son's earlier. She pointed out landmarks, the well where she had drawn water as a girl, the tree she had climbed with her brothers, the spot where she had first kissed the man who would become her husband. Each place held a story, and she shared them freely, her voice soft with remembrance, her eyes seeing not the village as it was, but as it had been, 50 years gone. We came at last to the old oak at the crossroads, the great tree that had stood at that spot since before anyone could remember. A crowd had gathered there, for the oak was central to the festival's oldest rituals. Garlands of autumn leaves had been wound around its trunk, and offerings had been placed among its roots. Small bundles of grain, cups of cider, flowers picked from the last of the season's blooms. Hannah stood before the tree for a long time, silent, her weathered face unreadable. Then she reached into the pocket of her blue dress and withdrew something small and bright. A ribbon, I realized, red as the roses her mother had grown, faded now with age, but still vibrant, still beautiful. I tied this to the oak when I was 17, she said. The night before I left the village to marry, I asked the tree to watch over my family, to keep them safe while I was far away. I never came back to see if it had listened. She moved forward, slowly, her old bones protesting each step, and reached up to tie the ribbon to the lowest branch. Her hands trembled, but she managed it, looping the faded red silk around the rough bark and pulling it tight. Now, it will remember me, she said. Now there will be something of me here, even when I'm gone. I helped her back to the inn, where her son and daughter-in-law were waiting with the children. They had bought treats at the festival, honey cakes and candied nuts, and a small wooden horse for the boy, a bright blue ribbon for little Marta's hair. The family sat together in the common room, eating and laughing, and old Hannah sat in the warmest spot by the fire, the patchwork quilt around her shoulders, watching her grandchildren with an expression of profound contentment. This, I thought, is what harvest means. Not just the gathering of crops, but the gathering of family. Not just the fruits of the field, but the fruits of a life. Children and grandchildren, memories and traditions, the long, unbroken chain of generations stretching back into the past and forward into the future. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. I cooked and served and cleaned and welcomed, hardly pausing to catch my breath. The common room filled and emptied and filled again, travelers coming and going like the tide. I heard snatches of 100 conversations, talk of the harvest, talk of the weather, talk of journeys begun and journeys ended, talk of loves found and lost and found again. As evening approached, the character of the festival changed. The bright energy of the day gave way to something softer, deeper, more reflective. The music in the village square grew quieter, the dancing slower. Lanterns were lit along the streets, their warm glow, pushing back the gathering darkness. Gathered for the evening meal, sharing tables with neighbors and strangers alike, and the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air. In my inn, the common room was fuller than it had been in months. Every table was occupied, every corner filled with a conversation and laughter. I moved through the crowd like a fish through water, carrying trays of food and mugs of ale, answering questions and offering directions, making sure each guest had everything they needed. Clara, the minstrel, played in the corner, a patchwork harp, singing sweetly beneath her fingers. She played songs of harvest and homecoming, songs of love and loss, songs that made people smile and songs that made people weep. Between pieces, she told stories, old tales of the gods who walked the earth in ancient days, who taught mankind to plant and harvest, who blessed the fields with fertility and the herds with abundance. Oren the puppeteer sat near her, listening with rapt attention, his clever hands still for once. Later, he would tell me that Clara's voice reminded him of his mother, who had been a singer in a traveling troupe. He had not heard such singing in 20 years, he said, and for a moment, listening to her, he had felt like a child again, safe and warm in a world where magic was real and anything was possible. The ribbon merchant Tobias sat at a table with Ingrid the baker's widow, and I watched something gentle unfold between them as the evening wore on. They talked quietly, heads bent together. Two people who had both lost something precious, finding comfort in shared understanding. We do not know what they said to each other, but when they parted for the night, they were both smiling, and I thought that perhaps the festival had given them something more than celebration. Perhaps it had given them hope. Old Hannah held court by the fire, surrounded by an ever-changing audience of children and adults who wanted to hear her stories. She told tales of the old days, of customs and rituals that had faded from memory, of a time when the boundary between the world of the living and the world of spirits was thin, and the harvest festival was as much about honoring the dead as celebrating the living. "We used to leave an empty chair at the table," she said, her voice soft in the firelight. "A plate of food, a cup of wine, for those who had gone before. We believed they came back at harvest time to see how their families fared, to share one more meal before the long sleep of winter." Little Marta, who had been sitting at her grandmother's feet, looked up with wide eyes. "Do they really come back?" she asked. Hannah smiled, reached down to stroke the child's hair. "I believe they do," she said, "not in bodies we can see or hands we can touch, but in the wind that stirs the leaves, in the song of birds at dawn, in the warmth of the fire and the taste of good food and the love of family gathered together. They are here, child. They are always here." The night deepened, and still the celebration continued. Outside in the village square, a great bonfire had been lit, and I could see its glow through the windows of the inn, could hear the distant sound of singing and drums. Some of my guests went out to join the festivities, but many stayed, preferring the quieter warmth of the common room to the boisterous celebration beyond. I stepped outside myself just for a moment to breathe the cool night air and look up at the stars. The harvest moon had risen, full and golden, bathing the world in silver light. The ancient oak at the crossroads was a dark shape against the sky, its branches reaching up like arms, raised in praise or prayer. The red ribbon Hannah had tied to its lowest branch fluttered in the night breeze. I thought of all the festivals that had been celebrated here, all the offerings that had been made, all the prayers that had been whispered to the old tree. Generations upon generations, each adding their own thread to the great tapestry of tradition. And now I was part of it, the keeper of this place, the guardian of this crossroads, the one who welcomed travelers and heard their stories and carried their memories forward. It is a heavy responsibility, but it is also a gift. I returned to the inn and continued my work. The hours passed, and gradually the common room emptied as travelers sought their bed. The fire burned low, the candles guttered, the sounds of celebration faded into the quiet of the night. By midnight, only a few guests remained, Clara still playing softly in the corner, Orrin listening with closed eyes, Tobias and Ingrid talking in low voices, old Hannah dozing in her chair by the fire. I brought them fresh cider and blankets, made sure they had everything they needed, then retreated to my own corner with a leather-bound journal. Now I write by the light of the white candle, recording the day's events while they are still fresh in my memory. The common room is silent around me, the fire burning low, the shadows deep in the corners. Through the window, I can see the harvest moon descending toward the western horizon, its golden light painting the crossroads in shades of amber and shadow. The stonemason's carved oak tree stands on the mantel beside the candle, a small reminder of the festival and the travelers who pass through. I find myself looking at it often as I write, tracing its rough-hewn branches with my eyes, thinking of the real tree outside and all it has witnessed over the centuries. Tomorrow, the festival will continue, and there will be more stories to hear, more moments to preserve. But tonight, in this quiet hour, I hold close the memory of old Hannah tying her ribbon to the oak tree, of Clara's voice rising in song, of strangers becoming friends over shared meals and shared stories. This is what the Harvest Festival means. This is what it has always meant. A gathering, a celebration, a remembering, and I am grateful to be part of it. The 18th day of the harvest moon. The second day of the festival dawned gray and misty, the sun hidden behind a blanket of clouds that had rolled in during the night. The world outside my window was soft and hazy, the colors muted, the sounds dampened by the heavy air. Rain threatened but did not fall, and the festival continued despite the change in weather. I spent the morning in the kitchen, preparing food for the day's guests. The harvest stew bubbled in the great iron pot, thick and fragrant with herbs. Fresh loaves cooled on the wooden table, their crusts golden and crackling. I sliced cheese and pickled vegetables, set out crocks of butter and pots of honey, filled pitchers with cider and ale. The inn was quieter than it had been the day before. Many of my overnight guests had departed early, eager to reach their destinations before the weather turned. Those who remained were a mixed group, some planning to stay for the final night of the festival, others waiting to see if the clouds would break before continuing their journeys. Old Hannah did not come down for breakfast. Her son Willem told me she was tired from the previous day's activities and would rest in her room until noon. I sent up a tray of tea and bread, hoping the rest would restore her strength. The morning brought a new traveler to the inn, a man I had not seen before, though something about him felt familiar in a way I could not quite place. He arrived on foot, emerging from the mist like a figure from a dream. He was tall and thin, dressed in a long gray coat that blended with the fog, his face shadowed by the brim of a worn leather hat. He carried no pack, no belongings that I could see, only a walking stick of pale wood that tapped rhythmically against the road as he approached. I met him at the door of the inn as I meet all travelers. "Welcome," I said. "The inn is warm, and there is food and drink if you need it." He looked at me with eyes that were pale gray, almost silver. and there was a depth in his gaze that made me feel I was being weighed, measured, assessed in some way I did not understand. "Thank you, innkeeper," he said. His voice was soft, almost musical, with an accent I could not place. "I have traveled a long way, and I am grateful for your hospitality." He came inside and took a seat in the corner of the common room, away from the fire, away from the other guests. He ordered only a cup of tea, which he sipped slowly, his eye moving around the room as if cataloging every detail. The herbs above the mantel, the old stones of the fireplace, the white candle burning on its shelf. I watched him when I thought he was not watching me, curious about this strange, silent man who seemed so out of place among the festival's merry travelers. He did not join in any conversation, did not acknowledge any of the other guests, simply sat in his corner and observed. When Clara began to play her harp, he turned toward her with an expression of intense interest. He listened to every note, every word, his pale eyes fixed on her face, as if memorizing her features. When she finished a song, he did not applaud or offer praise like the other listeners. He simply nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and returned to his tea. At midday, I brought him a bowl of stew, though he had not asked for it. "You should eat," I said. "The mist is cold, and you have traveled far." He looked at the bowl, then at me, and for a moment something flickered in his pale eyes, surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. "You're kind," he said, "kinder than you need to be." "It is my duty," I replied, "and my pleasure." He ate slowly, thoughtfully, as if each bite required consideration. When he finished, he pushed the empty bowl aside and sat back in his chair, his hands folded on the table before him. "Tell me about the oak tree," he said. I was surprised by the question, though I suppose I should not have been. The ancient oak is a landmark known to travelers throughout the region. But there was something in the way he asked, a weight, an urgency, that told me he was not merely curious about a notable tree. "It has stood at the crossroads for as long as anyone can remember," I said, "perhaps longer. Some say it was here before the first settlers came to this land, before the roads were built, before the villages were founded. It is significant, important. People make offerings to it, tie ribbons to its branches, whisper prayers among its roots." "And do the prayers work?" he asked. I considered the question carefully before answering. "I do not know if the tree hears," I said. "I do not know if there is anything to hear, but I know that people find comfort in the asking. They find peace in the ritual, in the connection to something older and larger than themselves. Whether the prayers are answered, that is beyond my understanding." He nodded slowly, his pale eyes distant. "I have known many trees," he said, more to himself than to me. "Oak, and ash, and rowan, yew and holly and hawthorn. They stand at the boundaries, you know, the old boundaries between this world and others. They mark the places where the walls are thin." I did not know how to respond to this, so I said nothing. He did not seem to expect a reply. He simply sat in silence for a long moment, then rose from his chair and walked to the door of the inn. "I should like to see this tree," he said, "before I continue my journey." He went out into the mist, his gray coat disappearing into the gray air, his walking stick tapping against the ground. I watched from the doorway as he approached the ancient oak, as he stood before it with his head bowed, as he placed both hands on its rough bark. I do not know how long he stood there. Time seemed to stretch and blur, the mist swirling around him, the world holding its breath. Then abruptly he stepped back, turned, and walked away, not toward the inn, but down the western road toward the frontier lands beyond. He did not return to pay for his tea and stew. He did not say goodbye. I found later a single silver coin on the table where he had sat, an old coin worn smooth with age, stamped with a design I did not recognize. A tree, I thought, though the details were too faded to be certain. A tree with spreading branches, or perhaps a figure with arms raised to the sky. I keep the coin in my pocket now. I do not know what it means, or who the gray stranger was, or why his visit feels significant in ways I cannot articulate, but I have learned to trust such feelings, to pay attention when the world offers mysteries. Not everything can be explained, and perhaps not everything should be. The afternoon passed quietly. The mist lifted somewhat, though the clouds remained, and a few determined travelers ventured out to the village for the final day of festival activities. I stayed at the inn, tending to my remaining guests, preparing for the evening's celebration. Old Hannah came down in the late afternoon, rested but somehow diminished, as if the exertions of the previous day had cost her something she could not easily replenish. She sat in her usual spot by the fire, the patchwork quilt around her shoulders, and watched the flames with distant eyes. Her granddaughter Marta sat beside her, holding her hand. "Tell me another story, grandmother," the child said. Hannah smiled, though there was a weariness in it that had not been there before. "What kind of story would you like?" she asked. A true one," Marta said, "about when you were little like me." So Hannah told her a story, a simple tale about a girl who found a bird's nest in her mother's rose garden, about how she watched the eggs hatch and the chicks grow, about how she felt when they finally flew away, leaving the nest empty. It was not a dramatic story, not full of adventure or magic or excitement, but it was true, and it was hers. And Marta listened with the same rapt attention she might have given to a tale of dragons and heroes. When the story was finished, Marta climbed into her grandmother's lap and fell asleep there, her small hand still clutching the old woman's fingers. Hannah held her close, stroking her hair, humming a soft melody that I half remembered from somewhere, a lullaby perhaps, one of those songs that seem to exist in the blood, passed down through generations without ever being taught. I brought them both a blanket, tucked it around their legs. Hannah looked up at me and smiled. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for letting an old woman remember. "It is my honor," I said. "This is what the inn is for." She nodded, her eyes already drifting closed. "I know," she murmured. "I know what this place is. I knew the moment I saw the candle." Before I could ask what she meant, she was asleep. Evening came, and with it the final celebration of the Harvest Festival. The village bonfire burned brighter than ever, a great tower of flame visible from the windows of the inn, and the sound of music and laughter carried on the night air. Many of my guests went out to join the revelry, but some stayed behind, those too tired to celebrate, those who preferred the quiet warmth of the common room, those who found their festival right here, among strangers becoming friends. The common room had taken on a particular character that evening, not the bustling energy of the previous nights, but something softer, more intimate. The lanterns cast pools of golden light across the tables, and shadows gathered in the corners like comfortable old friends. The fire crackled and popped, sending occasional sparks up the chimney, and the smell of wood smoke mingled with the lingering fragrance of the evening stew. I moved through the room, refilling cups and clearing plates, making sure each guest had what they needed. There is a rhythm to such service, a kind of dance between tables that becomes second nature after years of practice. I know when to approach and when to leave, but when to offer a word of conversation and when silence is what's needed. At one table, a group of farmers from nearby homesteads were sharing stories of harvests past. The year the rains came too early, the year the insects threatened the crops, the year everything aligned perfectly and the yields were more abundant than anyone could remember. They spoke with the easy familiarity of people who share a common language, the language of the land and the seasons and the endless cycle of planting and growth. At another table, a young scribe traveling north to take a position in a lord's household sat alone with a book, reading by candlelight, occasionally looking up to watch the celebration with an expression of gentle wonder. He had told me earlier that he had never attended a harvest festival before in the city where he was raised. Such traditions had been forgotten long ago, and I could see him absorbing every detail, storing it away for later, perhaps to appear someday in the documents he would write. Near the window, a pair of traveling merchants negotiated quietly over a shipment of wool, their voices low but intense, each seeking the best advantage for himself, while maintaining the respect that good business requires. They would reach an agreement before the night was over. They always did, and part as something almost like friends, connected by the invisible threads of commerce that bind the world together. Clara played again, her voice weaving through the firelight, and this time others joined her. A farmer with a fiddle, a merchant with a deep bass voice, a child with a wooden flute. The music they made was imperfect, rough around the edges, but it was full of joy and life, and the particular magic that comes when people create something together. Tobias, the ribbon merchant, stood up and asked Ingrid, the baker's widow, to dance. She hesitated, her cheeks flushing, then took his hand and let him lead her to the open space before the fire. They moved slowly, awkwardly at first, finding their rhythm, learning each other's movements. By the end of the song, they were laughing, and Tobias was spinning her gently, and Ingrid looked 10 years younger, her sadness lifted for a moment by the simple pleasure of dancing. Oren the puppeteer brought out one of his figures, a small wooden man with jointed limbs, and made it dance in time to the music, delighting the children who had gathered to watch. The puppet bowed and leaped and twirled, mimicking the movements of the human dancers with comic precision, and even the adults laughed at its antics. I watched from my corner, the leather journal open on the table before me, recording what I saw. These moments are what I live for. The connections, the transformations, the small miracles that happen when people come together in celebration. Tomorrow, my guests will scatter, returning to their homes and their lives, carrying the memories of the festival with them. But tonight, for these few precious hours, we are all part of something larger than ourselves. The bonfire in the village burned until past midnight, and even after its flames died down to embers, people lingered in the streets, reluctant to let the festival end. I could see their silhouettes from the window of the inn, dark shape moving against the distant glow, and I could hear their voices carried on the night wind. Not the words, but the music of them, the rise and fall of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, the quiet intimacy of people who have shared something meaningful and are not yet ready to let it go. The bonfire itself is a tradition older than the village, older perhaps than the roads themselves. Each year, the farmers bring their gathered stalks and dried brush, everything that cannot be used and must be returned to the earth. They pile it high in the center of the square. And when darkness falls on the final night of the festival, the eldest among them touches a torch to the base. The flames rise quickly, hungrily, devouring the offerings and sending sparks spiraling up into the night sky like earthbound stars, seeking to rejoin their heavenly kin. There is meaning in the burning, I have been told. The old ways held that the fire carried the essence of the harvest up to the gods, a thank offering for the bounty received and a prayer for the season to come. Whether anyone still believes this, I cannot say. But the ritual persists. The fire burns each year, and something in the human heart responds to the sight of flames reaching toward the heavens. In the inn, the celebration continued long into the night, the music softening, the conversations growing quieter, the fire settling into a steady glow. At last, one by one, the guests retired to their rooms. Clara packed away her harp, Oren wrapped his puppets in their cloths, Tobias and Ingrid said good night with a warmth that suggested their story was not yet finished. I swept the floor and banked the fire and extinguished the candles, leaving only the white candle on the mantel burning through the darkness. Then I climbed the stairs to my room, too tired to write more than a few words. The festival is ending. The harvest is gathered. Winter is coming, but tonight the inn is full of warmth and light and the echoes of music, and I am content. The 19th day of the harvest moon. The festival is over. I woke this morning to a world washed clean by overnight rain. The storm that had threatened all through the second day had finally arrived after midnight, drumming on the roof of the inn for hours before tapering off to a gentle drizzle by dawn. Now the sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long fingers of golden light across the wet landscape, and the air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves and the particular freshness that comes after rain. My guests were stirring early, preparing for their departures. The roads would be muddy today, but the weather was clearing, and those who had been waiting out the storm were eager to continue their journeys. I went down to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Porridge and bread and honey, eggs gathered fresh from the chickens, tea brewed strong and hot. The common room filled gradually as travelers descended the stairs, their faces a mixture of contentment and reluctance, that bittersweet feeling that comes at the end of a celebration. Willem's family was among the first to leave. The wagon was loaded, the oxen harnessed, the children bundled in warm clothes against the lingering chill. I helped old Hannah into the wagon, tucking the patchwork quilt around her legs. She took my hand and held it for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. "You have given me a gift I did not expect, the chance to say goodbye properly, to close a circle I thought would remain forever open." "I have given you nothing," I said. "You brought your own gift, your own stories. I was merely here to receive them." She smiled, that knowing smile of the very old. "You do not understand yet," she said. "But you will. This place is special. The crossroads, the oak, the candle that never burns down. You are part of something ancient, innkeeper, part of a long line of keepers who have stood at this threshold, welcoming travelers, hearing their stories, helping them find their way." I did not know how to respond. Before I could speak, she released my hand and settled back in her seat, pulling the quilt closer around her shoulders. "Go safely," she said, "and keep your fire burning bright. There are more travelers coming. There are always more travelers." Willem clicked his tongue, and the oxen began to move. The wagon creaked down the road, the children waving from the back, old Hannah's white hair bright in the morning sun. I watched until they disappeared around a bend in the road, then turned back to the inn. Throughout the morning, the other guests departed as well. The stonemason headed north toward the mountain quarries, his tools clanking in their oiled wrappings. Before he left, he showed me a small figurine he had carved during his stay, a rendering of the ancient oak tree, rough but recognizable, which he pressed into my hands as thanks for my hospitality. I set it on the mantel beside the white candle, where it stands now as I write. The young couple walked east toward the coast, hand in hand, their faces bright with the promise of their future together. They paused at the crossroads to look back at the inn, and I saw the young woman lean close to whisper something in her partner's ear. Whatever she said made him laugh, a sound of pure happiness that carried across the morning air. And then they turned and continued on their way, disappearing down the road that leads Mohus to the sea. The merchants who had negotiated so intently the night before departed together, their business concluded to mutual satisfaction. They had hired a local youth to help them transport their combined goods, and the three of them made an odd procession, two gray-haired traders and a lanky teenager pushing a heavily laden cart down the muddy road. The young scribe lingered longer than the others, sitting by the fire with his book, seemingly reluctant to leave the warmth of the common room for the uncertain road ahead. When at last he rose to go, he asked if he might write to me sometime to tell me of his new position, of the life he would build in the northern lands. I told him I would welcome such letters, and I meant it. There is something about the boy that reminds me of myself at that age, standing on the threshold of adulthood, uncertain of the path ahead, but determined to walk it nonetheless. Tobias, the ribbon merchant, loaded his colorful wagon and set off south, but not before inviting Ingrid, the baker's widow, to join him on the road. She accepted. I watched them go with a smile, pleased that the festival had brought them together. Two lonely people, both carrying grief, both in need of companionship. Perhaps they would travel together for a time and then part ways. Perhaps they would find something more lasting. Either way, the road ahead would be less empty for both of them. Clara, the minstrel, stayed longer than the others. She sat in the common room after breakfast, her harp on the table before her, running her fingers over its worn frame with an expression of deep thought. "I should have it repaired," she said, when she noticed me watching. "The neck is cracked, you see, and the sound box is warped from years of damp roads and cold nights. A good luthier could fix it, make it sing true again." "Why don't you?" I asked. She was silent for a moment, considering. "Because then it wouldn't be the same instrument," she said. "It wouldn't have the same voice, the same character. Every crack, every warp, every imperfection, they're part of its history, part of what makes it mine. If I fixed it, I would lose that." I understood what she meant. Some things are more valuable broken than whole. Some things carry their scars as stories, as proof of survival, as testaments to all they have endured. "Where will you go next?" I asked. "East," she said, "to the coast. There are taverns there that will pay for music, and ships that take passengers to distant lands. I have never seen the places beyond the sea. Perhaps it is time." She packed her harp carefully, wrapping it in cloths and placing it in a leather case worn smooth with use. Before she left, she played one final song, a simple melody, sweet and clear, a song of farewell and gratitude. When the last note faded, she stood and shouldered her pack. "Thank you," she said, "for the shelter, the warmth, the chance to play. Your inn is a good place. I hope I will pass this way again someday." "You will always be welcome," I said. She smiled, tipped her hat, and walked out into the morning light. By noon, the inn was empty. All my festival guests had gone, and the common room seemed larger somehow, quieter, the absence of their voices and laughter leaving a palpable void. I moved through the space slowly, straightening tables, sweeping floors, washing dishes, performing the small rituals of maintenance that filled the hours between one set of travelers and the next. The fire burned low, and I did not rebuild it. The day was mild, the autumn sun pouring through the windows, and for now the warmth was enough. I opened the shutters wide to let in the fresh air, and the smell of wet leaves and distant wood smoke drifted in on the breeze. In the afternoon, I walked to the ancient oak at the crossroads. The rain had washed away many of the offerings left during the festival. The bundles of grain scattered, the cups of cider overturned, the flowers wilted and crushed into the mud. But the ribbons remained, tied tight around the branches, and among them I found the red ribbon old Hannah had placed there, faded but still bright against the dark bark of the tree. I stood before the oak for a long time, thinking about what she had said to me that morning, about keepers and thresholds, about ancient duties and endless travelers, about the candle that never burns down. I have wondered about these things before, wondered about the nature of this place, the significance of the crossroads, the power that seems to reside in the old tree and the white candle and the inn itself. But I have never spoken of these wonderings, not even in the pages of this journal. Some things are too strange, too intimate, too uncertain to put into words. But now, standing in the shadow of the oak, I feel I must try. There is something here, something beyond the ordinary. I do not know what to call it, magic perhaps, or spirit, or simply the accumulated weight of countless lives passing through, countless stories beginning and ending at this spot where two roads meet. Whatever it is, I feel it. I have felt it since I was a child, watching my father build this inn, watching him welcome travelers with the same warmth I try to show now. He knew. I am certain of it. He knew what this place was, what it meant. That is why he built here, why he gave his life to maintaining the inn, why he passed it on to me with such solemnity, such care. He was not just leaving me a business or a building. He was leaving me a responsibility, a sacred trust to keep the fire burning, to keep the door open, to keep the crossroads safe for all who pass through. The gray stranger understood too. That is why he came, why he asked about the oak, why he left that strange silver coin on the table. He was testing me, perhaps, or paying respects, or simply acknowledging the kinship between keepers of boundaries. For I am sure now that is what he was, a guardian of some threshold I cannot see, some border between worlds I do not fully understand. And old Hannah knew. She recognized the candle. She said she knew what this place was from the moment she arrived, drawn back to it after 50 years, coming home not to the village of her childhood, but to the crossroads, to the oak, to the inn where all travelers find rest. I am part of something ancient. I feel it now more clearly than ever. And though I do not fully understand my role, I know that I will continue to play it, welcoming travelers, hearing their stories, keeping the fire burning through the long nights, writing in this journal by the light of the white candle. It is not just duty, it is calling. It is purpose. It is who I am. I returned to the inn as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and deep purple. The common room was still empty, still quiet, but it did not feel lonely anymore. It felt ready, waiting, expectant. A space held open for whoever might need it next. I built up the fire and set water to boil for tea. I lit the candles along the mantel, and the white candle at the center burned brighter than all the others, as it always does. I took down the leather journal and carried it to my small desk by the window where I could watch the last light fade from the sky. Now I write these words as the stars emerge one by one, as the harvest moon rises over the eastern mountains, as the world settles into the deep quiet of autumn night. The festival is over. The travelers have gone. The roads are empty, but they will fill again. They always do. Tomorrow or the next day or the day after that, someone will come, a merchant or a pilgrim, a family or a solitary wanderer, someone seeking shelter, someone with a story to tell. And I will be here, waiting, ready to welcome them, ready to listen, ready to add their tale to the great tapestry of stories that makes up the life of this inn. It is a good life, a meaningful life, and I am grateful for it. The 20th day of the harvest moon. A quiet day, the first truly quiet day since before the festival began. I woke late, having slept deeply and dreamlessly through the night. The sun was already high when I opened my eyes, its light streaming through my small windows, warming the simple room beneath the eaves. For a long moment, I simply lay there, listening to the silence, feeling the peace of it settle into my bones. There is a particular quality to silence after noise, a particular sweetness to stillness after activity. It is not emptiness. It is fullness of a different kind, rich and nourishing, necessary as rest after labor. I have learned to treasure these quiet times, to see them not as lacks, but as gifts. I rose and washed and dressed, then descended to the common room. The fire had burned down to embers during the night, and I rebuilt it with slow, careful movements, kindling first, then small sticks, then larger logs, watching the flames catch and grow, feeding them gently until they roared with warmth. The ritual of it calms me. Fire is perhaps mankind's oldest friend, and tending it connects me to all those who came before, all the way back to the first humans who gathered around flames in the darkness and found comfort there. The morning passed in small tasks. I swept the floors, though they were already clean. I polished the tables, though they gleamed from yesterday's attention. I checked the stores in the root cellar, though I knew exactly what remained. These are the tasks I perform when there are no travelers to serve. The quiet maintenance of a well-run inn, the careful preservation of a space that must always be ready to welcome whoever arrives. In the afternoon, I walked through the kitchen garden, assessing what remained after the first frost. The summer vegetables were long gone, but there were still hardy things growing, kale and chard, their leaves dark green and sturdy, late cabbages forming tight heads among the yellowing plants. I picked what was ready, filled my basket with the last of the season's bounty, and carried it back to the kitchen to wash and prepare. These vegetables will become soup, I think. A simple broth with onions and garlic, thick with greens and root vegetables flavored with the herbs that hang above the hearth. Soup is a comfort in the cold months ahead, and I find satisfaction in the making of it, the chopping and stirring, the slow simmering, the transformation of raw ingredients into something warm and nourishing. As I worked, I thought about the travelers who had passed through during the festival. So many faces, so many names, so many stories. Old Hannah and her ribbon, Clara and her patched harp, Tobias and Ingrid, finding each other amid the celebration. The gray stranger with his silver eyes and his strange questions. The children laughing, the musicians playing, the dancers turning in the firelight. They are all gone now, scattered to the four winds, continuing their separate journeys. But they left something behind, not things, not objects, but impressions, memories. The faint echoes of their presence that linger in the common room, in the corner where Clara played her harp, in the chair where Hannah told her stories, in the space before the fire where Tobias and Ingrid danced. An inn, I've come to understand, is not just a building, it is a vessel. It holds not just bodies, but spirits. Not just travelers, but their tales. Every person who passes through leaves something of themselves here, some small piece of their soul that becomes part of the place, woven into the fabric of the inn, alongside all the other pieces from all the other travelers across all the years. When I sit in the common room on a quiet night, alone with the beer and the candle, I sometimes feel I am not alone at all. I feel surrounded by presences, not ghosts, nothing so dramatic, but echoes, impressions, the accumulated warmth of countless lives that have touched this place and been touched by it in return. It is a comforting feeling. It makes the silence richer, the solitude less lonely. In the evening, I sat at my father's desk with the leather journal open before me, writing by the light of the white candle. Outside, the night was clear and gilt, the stars sharp as needles in the black sky, the harvest moon beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, once, twice, then silence. I wrote about the festival, the days of celebration, the nights of music and story, the moments of connection and revelation. I wrote about old Hannah and her ribbon, about Clara and her songs, about the gray stranger and his silver coin. I wrote about what I had realized at the oak tree, about the nature of this place and my role as its keeper. And I wrote about gratitude, because that is what fills my heart tonight as I look back on the Harvest Festival and all it brought. Gratitude for the travelers who trusted me with their shelter and their stories. Gratitude for the small miracles that unfolded in my common room, lonely people finding companionship, old wounds beginning to heal, ancient circles closing at last. Gratitude for the inn itself, this building of timber and stone that my father built and gave to me, this vessel that holds so much more than walls can contain. Tomorrow, the quiet will continue, or perhaps new travelers will arrive. The roads have settled after the festival rush, but they never stay empty for long. Someone is always journeying somewhere, always seeking shelter from the cold and the dark, always in need of a warm fire and a friendly word. And I will be here waiting. This is my harvest, not crops gathered from fields, but moments gathered from passing lives, stories heard and remembered, kindnesses given and received, the small, precious connections between strangers who share a fire for a night and then part, never to meet again, but carrying pieces of each other forward into whatever comes next. It is a good harvest, a rich harvest, and I am grateful. The 21st day of the harvest moon, the quiet continues. 3 days now without a traveler. Not unusual for this time of year when the roads are muddy and the days are growing short, and most people who intended to travel for the festival have already returned home. The inn stands patient at the crossroads, the fire burning steady, the candles shining through the night, waiting. I have used these days to attend to tasks long postponed. The hinge on the stable door has been repaired. It had developed a squeal that frightened the horses, and I finally found time to oil it properly. A loose board on the stairs has been nailed down. A crack in the chimney mortar has been patched. These small things accumulate over the busy seasons, and the quiet days are when I can address them, restoring the inn piece by piece, maintaining its strength against the coming winter. This morning, I walked to the village for supplies. The festival decorations had been taken down, the square returned to its ordinary function, and the village itself seemed quieter, smaller, as if the absence of crowds had shrunk it somehow. I bought salt and flour and a cask of ale, spoke briefly with the shopkeeper about the weather and the harvest, then made my way back to the inn with my purchases loaded on my back. On the way, I stopped again at the ancient oak. The tree is preparing for winter. Its leaves are falling faster now, carried away by each gust of wind, piling in drifts at its base. Soon the branches will be bare, stark against the gray autumn sky, and the tree will sink into its deep sleep until spring returns. But the ribbons remain, hundreds of them, tied over years and decades and perhaps centuries, faded and frayed and weathered, but still clinging to the branches, still marking the hopes and prayers of all who placed them there. Among them, the red ribbon old Hannah tied 5 days ago stands out, lit, brighter than the rest, newer, carrying the warmth of her memory. I wonder if she has reached home yet, if she is sitting by her own fire with her grandchildren around her, telling them stories of the festival and the oak tree and the inn at the crossroads. I wonder if she will think of this place sometimes, in the years that remain to her, and smile at the memory of tying that ribbon, of closing that circle, of saying goodbye at last. I hope so. I hope the journey brought her peace. The afternoon brought clouds, and by evening a soft rain was falling, pattering on the roof of the inn like gentle fingers. I sat in the common room with my soup and bread, listening to the sound of it, watching the fire dance in the hearth. The white candle burned on its shelf, as it always does, and its light seemed to pulse and shift with the rhythm of the rain, as if responding to some music I could not quite hear. I thought about the seasons, how they turn one into another, an endless wheel of growth and harvest, sleep and awakening. We are in the space between now, the threshold time when autumn gives way to winter, when the world prepares to rest. Soon the first snow will fall, blanketing the roads in white, and the travelers who come will be fewer, more determined, their needs more urgent. But the inn will be ready. It is always ready. That is what it means to be a keeper of this place, to maintain the fire, to stock the cellar, to hold the door open for whoever might need it, no matter the season, no matter the hour. In the evening, I wrote letters to the merchants I deal with, ordering supplies for the winter months, to the friends I have made in nearby villages, sending greetings and wishes for their health. Letter writing is a slow art, one I am not particularly skilled at, but I find comfort in it nonetheless. There is something about the act of putting words on paper and sending them out into the world, trusting that they will reach their destination, trusting that connection can span distance and time. When the letters were finished, I sealed them with wax and set them aside to be carried to the village next time I go. Then I took up this journal and began to write these words. The rain has stopped now. The night is clear, the stars sharp above the crossroads, the harvest moon a thin sliver descending toward the horizon. Soon it will be gone entirely, and the dark of the moon will come, and then the cycle will begin again, new moon waxing full, waning as it has since the beginning of time. I am part of that cycle as surely as the moon and the seasons and the oak tree. I grow and I rest, I welcome and I wait, I gather stories and I pass them on. It is not a grand life, not one that will be remembered in histories or songs, but it is my life, and I have made it meaningful, one traveler at a time, one night at a time, one entry in this journal at a time. Tomorrow, the quiet may continue, or it may end. A traveler may arrive, or the roads may remain empty. Either way, I will be here, the keeper of the crossroads, the guardian of the threshold, the innkeeper who welcomes all who need rest. And that is enough. The 22nd day of the harvest moon. She arrived just as the sun was setting, her silhouette black against the golden rose of the western sky. I was standing at the door of the inn, as I often do at this hour, watching the day's last light fade from the world. The air was cold, the wind carrying the promise of winter, and I was about to go inside and build up the fire when I saw her, a figure on the western road, walking slowly, steadily, a small pack on her back and a walking stick in her hand. I waited as she approached, watching her grow from a distant shape into a person. Young, I realized, no more than 20, with dark hair cropped short and practical, with a face that bore the marks of hard travel and harder choices. Her clothes were worn but clean, patched in several places, and her boots were caked with the mud of many miles. She stopped at the crossroads, looking at the inn, at the oak tree, at the 4 roads stretching away in each direction. For a long moment she simply stood there, as if making a decision, as if choosing which path to take next. Then she walked toward the inn. "Welcome," I said as she approached. "The fire is warm, and there is food if you need it." She looked at me with eyes that were dark and deep and full of things I could not read. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was rough, as if she hadn't spoken in days. "I have been walking a long time." I led her inside, sat her by the fire, brought her a bowl of soup and a cup of tea. She ate slowly, carefully, as if remembering how to do it, and as the warmth of the food and the fire seeped into her, I saw the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, the tightness around her eyes begin to soften. When she finished, she sat back in her chair and stared into the flames. "I was not sure where I was going," she said, though I had not asked. "I left home 4 weeks ago, maybe 5. I lost count of the days. Somewhere along the way, I just walked. West, mostly, away from everything I knew." I said nothing. I have learned that sometimes silence is the best invitation to speak. "There was a man," she continued, "a man I was supposed to marry. My family arranged it. He was wealthy, respectable, everything they wanted for me. But she paused, shook her head. "I could not do it. I could not become what they wanted me to be. So I left. I took what I could carry, and I walked out the door in the middle of the night, and I've not looked back since." She turned to look at me, and there was something fierce in her eyes, something bright and burning. "Do you think I was wrong?" she asked. It was not a question I expected, and I considered it carefully before answering. "I think," I said slowly, "that there are many ways to live a life, and not all of them fit every person. I think that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to become someone we are not. And I think that the road you have walked, whatever hardships it has brought, whatever losses, has brought you here, to this fire, at this moment. And that means something, even if I cannot say what." She stared at me for a long moment. Then something shifted in her face, a softening, a release, as if she had been holding her breath for weeks and finally allowed herself to exhale. "Thank you," she said. "I think I needed to hear that." Her name was Petra, she told me as the evening wore on. She came from a town far to the east, near the coast, where her family owned a shipping business. She had been raised to be proper and dutiful, to marry well and bear children and manage a household, and for most of her life, she had accepted this fate without question. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. She had read books she was not supposed to read, had conversation she was not supposed to have, had glimpsed a world beyond the narrow confines of the life that had been planned for her. And once she had seen that world, she could not unsee it. She could not pretend to be content with what had once seemed enough. So she had run, not toward anything specific, just away from the expectations and the duties and the man who wanted to own her, out into the wide world where she might, perhaps, find a place she could belong. "I do not know what I'm looking for," she admitted. "I do not know where I'm going or what I will do when I get there, but I know I could not stay. I know that if I had stayed, some part of me would have died, slowly, quietly, but surely." I understood better perhaps than she knew. "There are worse things than not knowing," I said. "There is certainty without truth. There is safety without life. You have chosen to be lost, and that takes a kind of courage that most people never find." She smiled at that, a small smile, tired and uncertain, but real. "You're very kind," she said, "kinder than you need to be." I thought of the gray stranger who had said those same words to me, and I wondered if there was some pattern here, some thread connecting us all, travelers and keepers, seekers and finders, all of us stumbling through the darkness toward lights we cannot yet see. "It is my duty," I said, "and my pleasure." She stayed that night, and the next, and the next. I did not ask her to leave, and she did not seem eager to go. The quiet days I had been experiencing continued, no other travelers arriving. And so it was just the two of us, the innkeeper and the runaway, sharing meals and conversations and the slow passage of time. She helped me with chores, though I did not ask her to. She chopped firewood and carried water from the spring and swept the floors of the common room. She had a way of working that was both determined and gentle, throwing herself into each task with full attention, as if finding peace in the simple labor of maintaining a place. One morning, I found her in the kitchen garden, pulling weeds from between the rows of winter vegetables. She looked up when she heard my approach, a smudge of dirt across her cheek, her dark hair escaping from its practical cut to fall across her forehead. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I woke early and couldn't sleep, and the garden looked like it could use some attention." "I don't mind at all," I said. "The weeds have been winning lately." She smiled at that, a real smile, one that reached her eyes, and returned to her work. I knelt beside her, and we weeded together in companionable silence, the only sounds the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the soft rhythm of our hands in the soil. It struck me then how rarely I have company for these small tasks, how often I work alone through the quiet hours between travelers. There's a different quality to shared labor, a warmth that goes beyond the physical presence of another person. Even the simplest work becomes richer when done alongside someone else. In the evenings, we talked. She told me more about her life, The strictness of her upbringing, the coldness of her intended husband, the moment when she finally realized she could not go through with the marriage. She spoke of the nights she had spent planning her escape, the fear and exhilaration of actually doing it, the strange freedom of the road where no one knew her name or her history. "I expected to feel guilty," she said one night, staring into the fire. "I thought the weight of what I had done would crush me, but instead I felt light, as if I'd been carrying a burden I didn't even know was there, and suddenly it was gone." She spoke of the road, the dangers and kindnesses she had encountered, the nights spent under stars, and the days spent walking through rain and sun. There had been moments of fear, a group of rough men on the road who had looked at her too long, a night when the cold had seeped so deep into her bones she thought she might not wake in the morning. But there had also been unexpected kindnesses. A farm wife who had shared her bread and asked nothing in return. A traveling merchant who had let her ride in his wagon for 2 days when her feet were too blistered to walk. An old man who had told her stories of his own youth when he too had left everything behind to seek something he could not name. And she asked me questions about the inn, about my life, about the travelers who passed through. She was curious about everything, hungry for stories, eager to understand a world so different from the one she had known. She wanted to know how I had come to be an innkeeper, what the work was like, whether I ever grew lonely in this isolated place where the roads crossed and the travelers passed through but never stayed. I told her what I could. I told her about my father building the inn, about the travelers who came and went, about the rhythms of the seasons and the quiet satisfaction of welcoming those who need rest. I did not tell her everything. Some things are not meant to be shared, not yet, but I told her enough. On the third night, she asked about the white candle. "It never burns down," she said, staring at it. "I have been watching it since I arrived. The flame flickers, but the wax never diminishes. How is that possible?" I considered how to answer. It was the same question Marta had asked, the same question I have sometimes asked myself. "It was a gift," I said, "from a woman who came here in the first winter after I took over the inn. She blessed this place and it said it would serve as a beacon, a light for those who need it. I do not understand how or why, but the candle has burned since then, without ever growing shorter." Petra was silent for a long moment. "There is magic in the world," she said finally, "more than I ever knew, more than I was ever taught." "Yes," I agreed, "there is." She left on the 4th day as the sun rose over the eastern mountains. She had made her decision sometime during the night, she told me. She would continue west toward the frontier, toward the new settlements where everything was still being built and where a woman with strong hands and a willingness to work might find a place for herself. "It feels right," she said as she shouldered her pack. "For the first time since I left home, I feel like I'm going somewhere, not just running away." I gave her what supplies I could spare: dried meat and hard bread, a pouch of herbs for tea, a warm scarf my father had knitted years ago. She tried to refuse to pay me for my hospitality, but I would not hear of it. This is what the inn is for, she said. Rest and recovery, food and shelter, and the knowledge that someone believes in you. Take these things and carry them forward. That is payment enough. She looked at me for a long moment, and something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, or gratitude, or simply the understanding that passes between two souls who have touched briefly and will remember each other always. Thank you, she said, for everything. Safe travels, I said, and may the road rise to meet you. She walked away down the western road, her figure growing smaller against the morning sky, until at last she disappeared over the horizon. I stood at the crossroads for a long time after she was gone, watching the empty road, thinking about all the travelers who have passed this way and all who are yet to come. Then I turned and went back inside to tend the fire and prepare for whoever might arrive next. The 23rd day of the harvest moon. The harvest moon has set for the last time. Tomorrow, the calendar will turn to a new month, and the harvest season will officially end. It has been a good harvest, not just of crops, but of moments. The festival brought more travelers than usual, more stories than I could ever record, more connections than I could ever count. And the quiet days that followed brought Petra, with her fierce eyes and her uncertain future, reminding me why this place exists. I have spent the day in contemplation, walking the grounds of the inn, standing at the crossroads, sitting with the ancient oak. The tree's leaves are nearly gone now, scattered by the wind, and the bare branches reach up into the gray sky like prayers or pleas, or simply the patient waiting of something that has stood in this spot for longer than anyone can remember. I walked the perimeter of the property this morning, something I do at the turn of each season. It is a kind of inventory, a way of seeing what needs attention before the weather changes. The fence around the kitchen garden needs mending in one corner where a post has begun to rot. The shingles on the stable roof have lifted in several places and will need to be nailed down before the winter storms arrive. The path from the road to the inn has grown muddy and uneven, and I should lay down fresh gravel when I have the chance. These are the small maintenance tasks that keep a place functioning, the endless cycle of repair and restoration that is the lot of anyone who tends a building. My father taught me to see these things, to notice the small signs of wear before they become serious problems. Care for the small things, and the large things will take care of themselves. At the oak tree, the ribbons flutter in the autumn wind, hundreds of them, tied over years and decades and perhaps centuries, faded and frayed and weathered, but still clinging to the branches, still marking the hopes and prayers of all who placed them there. Among them, I can still see the red ribbon old Hannah tied 6 days ago, brighter than the rest, newer, carrying the warmth of her memory. I counted the ribbons today, or tried to. I lost track somewhere around 200 when the branches grew too high and the colors too tangled to distinguish one from another. 200 prayers at least, and likely many more. 200 hopes, 200 wishes, 200 moments when someone stood before this tree and asked for something they could not obtain by any other means. I wonder how many were answered. I wonder if that is even the right question to ask. Perhaps the answering is not the point. Perhaps the asking itself is what matters. The act of naming our desires, of putting them into words, of offering them up to something larger than ourselves. I thought about old Hannah and her ribbon, about Petra and her journey west, about all the travelers who have come before and all who will come after. I thought about what it means to be a keeper of this place, to hold the door open and the fire burning, to welcome all who need rest. And I thought about my father, who built this inn with his own hands and gave it to me when he could no longer tend it himself. He understood something I am only beginning to grasp. That hospitality is not just a service, but a sacred trust. Not just a business, but a calling. He knew what this place was. He knew about the crossroads and the oak and the thin boundaries between worlds. He never spoke of it directly, but I see now how he moved through this space, how he treated every traveler with such reverence, how he maintained the inn not as a property, but as a shrine. I am trying to be worthy of his legacy. I am trying to carry forward what he began, to keep the faith he kept, to welcome all who come. It is not always easy. There are nights when the common room is empty and the wind howls outside, and I wonder if anyone will ever come again. There are days when the work feels endless and the loneliness weighs heavy, and I question whether any of it matters. But then a traveler arrives, weary, hungry, seeking shelter, and I remember why I'm here, what I am doing, what this place means to those who need it. Tonight I write these final words of the harvest season by the light of the white candle, watching its flame burn steady and bright, never diminishing. Outside, the stars wheel slowly across the sky, and the bare branches of the oak tree sway in the wind, and somewhere on the roads that lead to this crossroads, travelers are journeying toward shelters they have not yet found. They will find their way here, some of them. They will see the light in the window and the smoke rising from the chimney, and they will know that rest awaits them. And I will be here, waiting, ready to welcome them. The harvest is gathered, the festival has passed, winter is coming, but the fire still burns and the candle still shines, and the door is still open, and that is enough.
And so another season turns at the Crossroads Inn. The harvest has been gathered, not just grain and vegetables, but stories and memories, moments of connection that will warm the innkeeper through the long winter ahead. Old Hannah found her way home at last. Clara carried her music to the sea. Petra set off toward a future of her own making. And the innkeeper remains, as he always does, tending the fire, keeping the candle lit, waiting for whoever comes next. Thank you for spending this time with us, for settling in by the fire and letting the stories unfold, for being part of this quiet gathering at the crossroads. If you enjoyed tonight's journey, you might consider subscribing so you'll know when the next entry in the journal is ready. And if you're still awake, perhaps leave a word in the comments. The innkeeper always appreciates knowing who has passed through. But for now, the fire is burning low and the common room is peaceful, and rest awaits you. Until we meet again, good night.